Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton addressing the drug crisis at the southern border on Mornings with Maria last Tuesday. Just 2 days later, U.S. Customs and Border Protection made a record-breaking seizure of fentanyl and methamphetamine, more than 17,000 pounds in a Mexican citizen's truck. That's raising new concerns about what the Biden administration is doing to stop the flow of drugs into the United States. Joining us now is New York Congressman John Katko, the ranking Republican on the House Homeland Security Committee. Congressman, thank you so much for joining here. I served with you in the United States Congress. Tell us on the border, Kamala Harris doesn't seem to have time to deal with this. The president's never been. But you've spent a lot of time on this. Tell us about the drugs and the severity of the problem that's going down there.
Yeah, good to see you again, Jason. Listen, before I came to Congress, I was a 20-year federal organized crime prosecutor. And part of that time was spent on the border in El Paso going after cartels. And one thing the cartels know, when the border is secure, it's much more difficult for them to get their drugs across. When it's not secure, it's a piece of cake for them. And that's what we're seeing now. When the president opened up the border last year and allowed people to flow into this country, it was a boon for the cartels. They make $4,000 at least per person coming into this country. But more importantly, it allows them to create diversion by sending maybe 100 people in one spot to come across. All the Border Patrol agents have to come off the line to deal with that influx of immigrants coming, or aliens coming in. They just walk the drugs across the other way. And it's creating a mess in the United States all over the place. Over 100,000 people in the last year have died from drug overdoses. The vast majority of them had been laced with fentanyl. And the season of fentanyl at the border in the last year to kill every man, woman, and child in the United States 7 times over. Think about that. And given the fact that you seize that much, I know for a fact that when you seize that much more is getting through. So it's a crisis that this administration has created, and he's not doing anything about it.
Yeah, those numbers are stunning. You take such a microscopic amount of fentanyl and it will kill you. That's why when you look at 11,000 pounds, you think, well, that's kind of a big number. But when you understand how small a little dose will, that, like you said, that could kill every American in the United States if it was administered.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, in my district last week, we had 14 overdose deaths in one night. In the city of Syracuse, and that was I think it was drugs, fentanyl laced with marijuana, but I'm not positive. I think that was the preliminary reports. And I think Maria was right when she said earlier that they're not just lacing fentanyl with heroin. It's not just a heroin addict. If you're smoking pot, you could very easily succumb to pot laced with fentanyl, and that's what's really tragic. And this is a huge byproduct. And what people don't understand in upstate New York, for example, the border's thousands of miles away. It may be thousands of miles away, but really every state and every city is a border state and city now because of what's happening with these drugs coming into our country and the illegal aliens coming in that are involved in criminal conduct as well.
Well, the human trafficking, I wish people fully understood how dramatic this actually is, because the toll that it takes on humans and the human trafficking that's going on. I mean, look at these statistics. The statistics are absolutely stunning. They're overwhelming and nowhere close to what we've ever dealt with in the past, Congressman.
Yeah, you're right. And let's do a little math here. The cartels are getting enriched to an extent they've never dreamed of just by dealing drugs. They control the border. You cannot cross the border without paying them to come in, and a human trafficking standpoint. $4,000 is a minimum, and oftentimes much more. Many of these people coming across can't afford to pay it, so they are told by their cartels where to go and who to appear to work off their debt. So in fact, we are strengthening the cartel's grip on drugs and drug distribution networks in this country by having these people come across who have to pay off their debts to the cartels. It's crazy. I was there at the border at midnight, and people came across, and when I was in El Paso as a prosecutor, they ran from us. Now they ran to us and just basically said, I'm here, let me in. And within the next day, I got on a plane leaving at McAllen, Texas, and some of those same people I saw that night before that had come across were put on that plane with a packet telling them where to go and what airline to go to and where to get off. Never been tested, have no idea if they've been inoculated. Actually, virtually none of them have them with a COVID issue. And we have all those issues, plus we have them coming to work off their debt in countries all over the city, or cities all over the country. It's crazy.
So the president is set to close down traffic from 8 African countries, but you go to the southern border and there is no slowing it down and no COVID. Are they even doing testing, let alone making sure that people are vaccinated?
Yeah, think about it. 1.7 million people, 1.7 million have come across the border illegally this past year since President Biden signed his order. 1.7 million. Virtually none of them, if any of them, have been vaccinated. And they are not being tested in the facilities because they don't want to test them in the facilities because then they have to quarantine them and there's no place to put them. So they shove them out to these other organizations. Whether they get tested or not, we don't know. But we do know, like I said from my previous example, they're often put on planes right away with American people, not knowing who they are even because they don't have IDs. We have no idea if they're really bad people or not. And we have no idea what their health status is. And they're put on planes and sent all over the country. Yet, if you're from certain enumerated countries, you can't come into the United States. If you're in Mexico and get on a plane and fly into the U.S., you got to show a vaccine card. You can walk across the border and not have that. What the heck are we doing, Jason?
Well, there was a report earlier this week, Congressman, about these Afghans that were evacuated to the United States, some 80,000+ people. But now the report coming out of the Washington Examiner is that those people were not fully vetted, as was promised by the president himself.
Right. There's parallels between the border and Afghanistan. Both were ill-conceived ideas by this administration without thinking out the entire process. Obviously, the border is what we discussed. Afghanistan's the same way. They didn't think out the whole process. They didn't realize they had to help people get out of there that helped us. But in the process, he also created this mass of people that ran into the airport and got on the planes, many of whom didn't help the United States. We have no idea who these people are. I'm a very big supporter of refugee processes in the United States because refugees are generally very well vetted. I know people, I was a lost boy to Sudan, for example. He sat in a refugee camp for a year or two after he was designated to come to the United States so they could properly vet him. And he was a kid. These people came across, they ran through terror databases, and if the name didn't show up, they were in. And so myself and others on the Homeland Security Committee are doing rigorous oversight to try and figure out where the gaps are and what we need to do to slow this process down. They should not step foot into this country until they have been fully vetted. And if they're not fully vetted, as tough as their situation is, we got to hold them where they are until we can make sure they're fully vetted. We have an obligation to American people to keep them safe, and we're not doing that when we do things like this.
Look, the President of the United States and the Secretary of Homeland Security said all these people were vetted, and they haven't been. All right, New York Congressman John Katko, the ranking member on Homeland Security, thank you for joining us today.